Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Reading Rainbows. We are, of course, continuing Inkheart by Cornelia Funke. So let's jump on in. Today we are reading chapters 35 and 36 because chapter 36 is literally a page. Chapter 35, Different Aims. Faber sniffed the book. Do you know that books smell like nutmeg or some spice from a foreign land? I loved to smell them when I was a boy. Ray Bradbury, Fahrenheit 451. It was Farid who saw the car. Dustfinger was lying under the trees as it came along the road. He was trying to think clearly, but since learning the Capricorn was back, he couldn't pull his thoughts together. He still didn't know where to look for the book. The leaves of the trees cast shadows on his face. The sun sent white-hot needles down through the branches, and his forehead felt feverish. Basta and Flatnose were back too, of course. What had he expected? Had he thought they'd stay away forever? "Why get so agitated, Dustfinger?" he whispered up at the leaves. "You didn't have to come back here. You knew it would be dangerous." Then he heard footsteps approaching, rapidly. A gray car! Farid had run so fast he was gasping for breath as he flung himself down on the grass beside Dustfinger. "I think it's Silvertongue." Dustfinger jumped up. The boy knew what he was talking about. He really could tell those stinking metal beetles apart from one another. He himself had never got the knack of it. He quickly followed Farid to where there was a view of the bridge. The road wound away from it toward Capricorn's village like a slow-moving snake. They didn't have much time if they wanted to stop Silvertongue. At top speed they stumbled down the hillside. Farid was the first to reach the road. Dustfinger had always been proud of his own agility, but the boy was far nimbler, fast as a deer and with legs just as agile. And he was getting better at playing with fire now, too, as fascinated as a boy with a puppy. Silvertongue braked sharply when he saw Dustfinger and Farid in the road. He looked tired, as if he had slept badly for the last few nights. Eleanor was in the car beside him. Where had she sprung from? Hadn't she gone home to her book-lined tomb? And where was Meggie? Silvertongue's face darkened when he saw Dustfinger. As he got out of the car, he was rigid with anger. "Of course, you told them," he cried, coming toward him. "You told them where we were. Who else? What did Capricorn promise you this time?" "I told who what?" Dustfinger retreated. "I never told anyone anything. Ask the boy." But Silvertongue didn't so much as glance at Farid. The bookworm woman had gotten out too. She stood beside the car, looking grim. "The only person who told anyone anything was you," Dustfinger accused him. "You told the old man about me, even though you promised you wouldn't." Silvertongue stopped in his tracks. It was so easy to make him feel guilty. "Better hide the car under the trees there." Dustfinger pointed to the side of the road. "One of Capricorn's men could pass at any time, and they don't like to see strange cars here." Silvertongue turned and looked down the road. "Surely you don't believe him," cried Eleanor. "Of course he's given you away. Who else could? The man starts telling lies the moment he opens his mouth." "Basta took Meggie away." Silvertongue sounded hoarse, quite unlike himself, as if when he'd lost his daughter he'd lost the sound of his voice too. "They took Finoglio as well. Yesterday morning, when I went to meet Eleanor at the airport. We've been looking for the wretched village ever since. I had no idea how many deserted villages are in these hills. It wasn't until we came to the barrier over the road that I felt sure we were on the right track at last." Dustfinger said nothing, but looked up at the sky. A few birds as black as Capricorn's men were flying south. He had not seen them bringing the girl in, but then he hadn't spent the whole day watching that accursed village. "Basta was gone for several days. I thought he must be looking for the two of you," he said. "You're lucky he didn't get a hold of you, too." "Lucky?" Eleanor was still standing beside the car. Tell him to get out of the way, she told Silvertongue, or I'll run him down myself. He's been hand in glove with those miserable fire raisers all along. Silvertongue was still looking at Dustfinger as if he couldn't decide whether or not to believe him. Capricorn's men broke into Eleanor's house, he said at last. They took all the books from her library into the garden and burned them. Dustfinger had to admit that for a split second he felt something almost like satisfaction. What had the silly bookworm woman expected? Did she think Capricorn would simply forget her? He shrugged his shoulders and looked at Eleanor, his face unreadable. Only to be expected, he said. Only to be expected? Eleanor's voice almost cracked. Belligerent as a bull terrier, she marched up to him. Farid tried to bar her way, but she pushed him aside so roughly that he fell on the hot asphalt of the road. Maybe you can fool the boy with your fire-breathing and your colored balls, matchstick-eater, she snapped at Dustfinger, but it won't work with me. There's nothing left of the books in my library but a load of ash. The police were full of admiration for what those villains had done. At least they didn't burn your house down, Signora Loredan. Even your garden is all right except for the scorch marks on the lawn. What do I care for the house? What do I care for the wretched lawn? They burned my most valuable books. That's the thing. Some people don't realize just how valuable books are, not just monetarily, but, in terms of memories and just that intangible thing. Dustfinger saw the tears in her eyes, although she quickly turned her face aside, and suddenly something like sympathy did awaken him. Perhaps she was more like him than he'd thought. Her home, too, had consisted of paper and printer's ink. She probably felt as lost as he did in the real world. He didn't let her see his sympathy, of course, but hid it behind a mask of mockery and indifference, just as she hid her despair behind rage. What did you expect? Capricorn knew where you lived. Anyone could foresee that he'd send his men out when you'd escaped him. He always takes revenge. Oh, yes, and who told him where I live? You did. Eleanor swung her arm back with her fist clenched, but Farid caught it. He had grazed his knee on the road. He didn't give anything away, he cried. Nothing at all. He's only here to steal something. Eleanor lowered her arm. So that's it, Silvertongue went up to them. You're here to get hold of the book. That's crazy. Well, how about you? What are you planning to do? Dustfinger looked at him scornfully. You're just going to walk into Capricorn's church and ask for your daughter back, are you? Silvertongue did not reply. He won't hand her over, and you know it, Dustfinger went on. She's only the bait, and as soon as you've swallowed it, the pair of you will be Capricorn's prisoners for the rest of your lives, most likely. I wanted to call the police. Eleanor freed her arm crossly from Farid's brown hands, but Mortimer was against it. Sensible of him. Capricorn would have abandoned Meggie up in the mountains, and you'd never have seen her again. Silvertongue looked up at the nearby mountains looming dark behind their foothills. Wait until I've stolen the book, said Dustfinger. I'm going to creep into the village again tonight. I won't be able to get your daughter out the way I did last time, because Capricorn has trebled the guards, and the whole village is lit up at night now, brighter than a jeweler's shop window. But perhaps I can find out where they're keeping her prisoner. Then you can do what you like with the information, and in return for my trouble, you could try reading me back into the book. What about it? Why does he still think that Mortimer can read him back into the book? Yeah, he said over and over again that he can't do it, that there's no way for him to do it. Yeah, I mean, I'm all for Dustfinger's persistence and all and wanting to get home, but yeah, he just can't do it. Dustfinger considered this a very reasonable proposition, But Silvertongue thought it over only briefly before shaking his head. "No," he said. "No, I'm sorry. I can't wait any longer. Meggie needs me." With these words, he turned and went back to the car. But before he could get in, Dustfinger barred his way. "I'm sorry, too," he said, snapping open Basta's knife. "You know I don't like these things, but sometimes people have to be protected from their own stupidity. I'm not going to let you stumble into the village like a rabbit into a trap, just for Capricorn to shut you and your magic voice away. It won't help your daughter, and it certainly won't help me." Well, I mean, at least he admits that he's more worried about himself than Meggie, but still. At Dustfinger's signal, Farid had drawn his knife too. Dustfinger had bought it for him in the village by the sea. It was a ridiculous little thing, but Farid pressed it into Eleanor's ribs so hard that she grimaced. "Good God, are you planning to slit me open, you little wretch?" she snapped at him. The boy jumped, but he did not remove his knife. "Move the car off the road, Silvertongue," ordered Dustfinger. "And don't get any silly ideas. The boy will keep his knife pressed to your bookworm friend's chest until you're back here with us." Silvertongue obeyed. Of course. What else could he do? They tied him and Eleanor to the trees just behind the burnt-out cottage, only a few paces from their own makeshift camp. Eleanor scolded even louder than Gwyn when he was pulled out of the backpack by his tail. "Stop that," Dustfinger told her. "It won't do any of us any good for Capricorn's men to find us here." That worked. She fell silent at once, as if she'd swallowed her tongue. Silvertongue had leaned his head back against the tree trunk and closed his eyes. Farid checked all the knots again carefully, but then Dustfinger beckoned him over. "I want you to keep a watch on these two when I go down to the village tonight," he whispered. "And don't start carrying on about ghosts again. After all, you won't be alone this time." The boy looked at him with an injured expression, as if Dustfinger had taken his hand and thrust it into the fire. "But they're tied up," he protested. "So what is there to watch? No one's ever managed to undo my knots. Word of honor. Please, I want to go with you. I can be your lookout, or distract the guards. I can even get into Capricorn's house. I'm quieter than Gwyn." But Dustfinger shook his head. "No," he said firmly. "Tonight I'm going alone. If I want someone following me wherever I go, I'll get myself a dog." And with that he left the boy. It was a hot day. The sky above the hills was blue and cloudless, and there were hours yet to pass before darkness fell. Chapter 36, In Capricorn's House. "It's the place that worries you," said Hazel. "I don't like it myself, but it won't go on forever." Richard Adams, Watership Down. Two narrow metal bunks, one above the other against a whitewashed wall, a cupboard, a table by the window, a chair, an empty shelf with nothing but a candle on it. Meggie had hoped to be able to see the road, or at least the parking area through the window, but the only view was of the yard below. A couple of Capricorn's maids were bending over the vegetable patch pulling out weeds, and chickens were pecking around in a wire netting run in one corner. The walls surrounding the kitchen garden were high enough for a prison. Finoglio was sitting on the lower bed, staring gloomily at the dusty floor. The wooden floorboards creaked whenever they stepped on them. Outside the door, Flatnose was protesting to Basta. "You want me to do what? No, find someone else for the job, damn it. I'd rather go over to the next village, put gas-soaked rags outside someone's door, or hang a dead rooster from the window frame, or run around outside the house with a devil mask on, like Cockerel had to do last month. But I'm not cooling my heels here just to keep a watch on an old man and a little girl. Get one of the lads. They'll be glad to have a change from cleaning cars." I don't know. Personally, I'd rather take the guard job duty, you know? I mean, at least you get to, relax, whatever, rather than having to run around messing with dead roosters or wearing a devil's mask. That's just me. But Basta wasn't open to persuasion. "You'll be relieved after supper," he said. Then he was gone. Meggie heard his footsteps retreating down the long corridor. There were 5 doors to pass. Then go down the staircase. At the foot of the stairs, turn left for the front door. She had carefully taken note of the way. But how was she to get past Flatnose? She went over to the window again and opened it. Just looking out made her feel dizzy. No, she couldn't climb down. She'd break her neck. "Leave the window open," said Finoglio behind her. "It's so hot in here. I feel as if I might melt." Meggie sat down on the bed beside him. "I'm going to run away," she whispered, "as soon as it gets dark." The old man looked at her incredulously, shaking his head very firmly. "Are you mad? It's much too dangerous." Out in the corridor, Flatnose was still muttering angrily to himself. "I'll say I have to go to the toilet." Meggie was clutching her backpack. "Then I'll just run off." Finoglio took her by the shoulders. "No," he whispered emphatically. "No, you won't. Well, think of something. Thinking up ideas is my job, remember?" Meggie tightened her lips. "Yes, all right," she murmured, getting up to go back to the window. Dusk was already falling outside. "I'm going to try all the same," she thought as Finoglio stretched out with a sigh on the narrow bed behind her. "I'm not going to just sit here as bait. I'll run away before they catch Mo, too." And for the 100th time, as she waited for darkness, she tried to push away the question that kept coming into her head. Where was Mo? Why hadn't he come? And that's the end of that chapter. I thank you for joining me. I wonder, will Meggie be successful in her attempt to run away? Or will she get caught? And if she's caught, how will she get punished? Because we know that she's going to get punished somehow. So, that'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how Dustfinger manages when he sneaks into the village. Will Meggie, in her attempt to run away, run into Dustfinger? And, how will Dustfinger react if that happens? A lot to find out. I hope you'll join me next time, and I hope you'll have a great day.